Good morning, Mr. Freund. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Judge.
Are you ready this morning?
I am indeed, Judge. We have available 2 witnesses to lead this morning, if all goes well.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead. You may call your first witness.
Thank you, Chair. The first witness is Ms. Dikeledi Magadzi. Ms. Magadzi, could you maybe come on screen, please?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Deputy Judge President.
Good morning, Ms. Magadzi. Good morning. Thank you for making yourself available to come and assist the Commission. Yes, Mr. Freund, may I ask the Registrar to administer the oath of affirmation?
Please do.
Please, Registrar. Please come back on the screen, Ms. Magadzi.
That all you need to do, Ms. Magadzi, is say something, and then you will come on screen.
Can you hear me, Ms. Magadzi?
I can hear you, Chief
Yes.
Justice. Deputy Chief Justice, I'm sorry.
Well, I see you are promoting me this morning. Yes, can I just confirm?
I can hear you. Yep.
Yes. Can I just confirm the correct pronunciation of your surname? Is it Magadzi, or what is the correct pronunciation?
That's correct.
Magadzi.
That's correct. It's Magadzi.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, the registrar will administer either the oath, prescribed oath or affirmation in accordance with your choice.
Please state your full names for the record.
I'm Dikeledi Magadzi.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't have.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much, Ms. Magadzi. Mr. Freund, do you want to proceed?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, you will recall on a previous occasion, we have made mention of Exhibit ZZ1 at the beginning of Volume 1, and you have provisionally admitted the whole of ZZ1,
Yes.
which would include ZZ1.9, which is the affidavit of Ms. Magadzi. But I will now take Ms. Magadzi to ZZ1.9 that starts in Volume 1 at page 90.
Thank you, Mr. Freund. Yes.
Ms. Magadzi, can you confirm that at the request of the African National Congress, and in response to an invitation from the Commission to your political party, you were one of several people who deposed to affidavits and submitted them to the Commission through Mr. Krishnaidu?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you have with you a copy of your own affidavit, paginated in accordance with the pagination system of the Commissions?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. If you would just look, please, at page 90 in Volume 1, that should be the front page of your affidavit. and then go through to page 99. That should be the page where you signed. Can you confirm that that is your affidavit?
Yes, it's my signature.
Thank you. So, Chair, to the extent that this was provisionally admitted, I ask that it be admitted as Annexure ZZ 1.9.
Thank you. The affidavit of Ms. Felicitas Dikeledi Magadzi, which starts at page 90, is now finally admitted as Exhibit WZ 1.19. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Magadzi, I see from the first page of your affidavit that you are a member, you are currently Deputy Minister of Transport. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And is it correct that you became a Member of Parliament in the National Assembly from the commencement of the Fifth Parliament, in other words, from 2014, and that you have remained a Member of Parliament since then?
Yes, that's correct.
And I get the impression from your paragraph 3 that in the 20 years before that, before you came to Parliament, you served in the Limpopo provincial government as MEC in a number of capacities. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And when you came to Parliament as a Member of Parliament with effect from 2014, as you say in paragraph 6 of your affidavit, is it correct that you were appointed as the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Transport?
That's correct.
Now, it's precisely because you were the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Transport between 2014 and 2019 that you were requested by your organisation to depose to this affidavit, your organisation having been informed that this was one of the committees on which evidence would be led before the Commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you say in paragraph 7 of your affidavit that your portfolio committee consisted of 12 members, 7 from the ANC, 2 from the Democratic Alliance, and 1 each from the Inkatha Freedom Party, Economic Freedom Fighters, and National Freedom Party. That's correct, is it?
That's correct.
And I suppose it follows that because 7 of the 12 came from the ANC, they would, by having the majority vote, be in a position ultimately to determine the decisions of that committee. Do you agree?
That's correct. ANC had 7 members.
Now, you make the point in paragraph 8 that this portfolio committee's function was to oversee the operations of the Department of Transport, and that that department had 12 state-owned entities under its jurisdiction, of which PRASA was just one. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you say in paragraph 9, the first sentence, overall, the committee performed its oversight obligation well. Does that remain your view?
That's my view. I believe that the committee was doing its work well in terms of oversight on all the entities plus the department.
Right, thank you. But you do make the point in paragraph 10, well, in paragraphs 9 and 10, You say, save for PRASA, the other state-owned entities that reported to the Portfolio Committee were relatively stable, but PRASA was a particular concern, and the committee focused its attention on this enterprise during your tenure as chairperson. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then in paragraph 11, you refer, and I don't think there's any controversy about this, to the fact that PRASA was then undergoing a modernization process, and it involved very substantial transactions that it was involved with, including revitalizing of platforms and stations, refurbishing trains, purchase of a new train from France and locomotives from Brazil, renewal of railway tracks, and so forth. It was undergoing, it was engaged in a fundamental process of restructuring and reconstituting itself, and involving an enormous amount of public expenditure. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
And then you make
the modernization program, as we
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I wanted to indicate that on our arrival, we were given a document which was indicating the modernization program of PRASA, and subsequent to that, we were following up on how work was being done, and that is why I indicated in the previous paragraph to say we met with challenges as we're trying to follow up and oversee the work, as was indicated, not only in their modernization documentation, but also in their strategic planning of the year 2014 to 2019. We saw that there were problems in terms of them implementing the strategic plan, and also even with their annual plans, there were challenges.
Right, and we're going to come to that in some detail shortly, but I'm just trying to sketch the background. And part of the background is the point that you make in paragraph 12, which is that it was difficult to carry out the committee's oversight obligation as a consequence of the high turnover of executives, chief executive officers, and board members after 2015. Is that a fair summary of the point you were trying to make there?
That's correct.
And you say during your tenure as chairperson, there were 3 ministers, Dipuo Peters, Joe Masangwanyi, and Blade Nzamande. There were 4 boards. There were numerous chief executive officers, and that this instability, you say, hampered the Portfolio Committee's efforts to follow up on allegations in the media that the trains purchased were not fit for purpose. Let's just leave that last sentence for the moment out of account. We'll come back to that. I think the point you're really trying to stress here was a period of very considerable instability at the level of minister, at the level of board, and at the level of chief executive officer, and frankly also at the level of senior management, at the level directly below chief executive officer. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's correct.
Now, you then say in paragraph 13 that despite the high turnover of ministers, you did not experience any pushback from the executive authority, and there was alignment, you say, between yourself and the different ministers. Now, I'd just like to focus very briefly on that feature of parliamentary oversight, the importance of the relationship between the chair of the relevant portfolio committee and the minister responsible for that same portfolio. You would agree, I presume, that that is an important relationship which affects the effectiveness of parliamentary oversight in respect of that portfolio.
That is correct. I would say all the three ministers, we really work amicably. And whenever there were issues, I will raise with the minister responsible, and we'll have discussions. Even them attending the portfolio committee meetings was not an issue at all.
All right. And then in paragraph 14, you say, another factor which made it difficult for the committee to exercise proper oversight over PRASA was the difference of approach between the committee and the PRASA board as to how challenges at PRASA should be dealt with. Now, I would ask you please to elaborate, bearing in mind the very point that you've made about instability. There was a board that had been chaired by, if I'm not mistaken, Sifiso Buthelezi. There was a board that replaced that board that was chaired by Mr. Popo Molefe, if I remember correctly. That board itself was removed by the minister and replaced by an interim board. That interim board was again replaced by Mr. Popo Molefe's board. That board's term of office came to an end and another board was installed. That board in due course was itself removed and so forth. So it's important for us to refer to that in order to understand what it is you're trying to say in paragraph 14. When you say there was a difference of approach between the committee and the PRASA board, could you be a little more specific, please?
Thank you very much. We indeed, like you had indicated, we had Mr. Buthelezi, who, when on our arrival, the board did not stay very long. It had reached their term of office expired, and the board that was chaired by Dr. Molefe came in, and then we had a board which actually was chaired by the now Judge Maluleke. And Mr. Molefe came back again for a short stint, and then there was Mr. Koyama. But I need to indicate that our challenge was what we were seeing as the portfolio committee, and I'll speak particularly to the board that was chaired by Mr. Molefe, was that whenever we wanted information, we want to do oversight, most of the things, Mr. Molefe would always remind us that we are like overstepping our mark with respect to the oversight that we want to do, and we are interfering with his fiduciary duties as the board. And these were some of the things which actually we were experiencing with him. To an extent, let me indicate that we had an oversight meeting that we wanted to go and see the toll trains. We wanted to have discussions with the board on the SA fencing issue. And lastly, our oversight in that particular time was also to go and see the factory that was established in Niger. But let me indicate that we were also accompanied by the portfolio committee on appropriation. We were together with that committee. On our arrival, when we wanted to deal with the issues of the SA fencing in a meeting, we ended up not talking to the issues because the chairperson of the board left us in that meeting indicating that he's got other issues to deal with, and therefore, knowing very well that the acting group chief executive has said to us that the reinstatement of the SA fencing was the decision of the board. Therefore, it became a futile exercise for us to continue talking to the issues of the SA fencing because we wanted to get issues from the board. And I need to indicate that The other thing which was kind of challenging to us was whenever we wanted to meet with the board of PRASA, it will only be the chairperson of the board who will come to the meeting. Even when we were dealing with matters that are relating to audit and risk, the chairperson of audit and risk will never be there. It will only be the chairperson of the board, which actually was say, as a portfolio committee. It was a challenge for us to can be able to deal with issues because you will have different subcommittees of the board, which actually you expect that they should be able to be held accountable in this regard. And I need to say, going back to this time when we were with the appropriation committee, we went indeed to go and look at the toll trains, and we satisfied ourselves that we will go back to Parliament and we will sit down and as committee and say, these are the findings that we had, which indeed we were able to do. And lastly, the other site visit that we had to do was to go to Niger to go and check the factory. Whilst we were there, we were told that the factory is not ready and therefore we couldn't go and visit that factory. But at the center was that you're having functionaries, you don't have a board which can be able to explain some of the things which you're seeing being spoken to in the documents. When you want to go and do in local inspection, you are told that the factory has not been established. I also need to indicate that this for us to do between the two portfolio committees, we were following up on what the Auditor General had indicated when the PRASA audit came to Parliament. And I need to indicate that we worked for a short while with Mayor Maluleke, who actually part of our focus was mainly on the trains, and besides the trains, we were worried that PRASA does not make a follow-up on, or does not even come and report back to the issues that have been raised by the Auditor General. And this was a concern. Remember, once we have gone through the process of what the Auditor General will do, we will have the budget review report that will be sent to Parliament, which actually will be able to indicate that these are the findings that we had with respect to this SOE, and therefore we expect that we must make follow-ups as to whether what we have raised in this report of Parliament is being implemented. But let me say, to the dismay of the committee, many a times the issues that will be raised either by the Auditor General, by the Portfolio Committee, will find themselves being repeated over and over. I can just simply indicate that there are several things that the Auditor General would raise, and there will be no correction of the issues that were raised by the Auditor General. Let me just say that the last committee that came in of Ms. Kweyama, it was for me a very short stint. I wouldn't talk much about them because that's when we went into elections, and subsequently I can't say as to what really we did with the committee of Mayor Kweyama. But for me, the committee that I worked quite a long time with was the committee that was led by Dr. Molefe.
Thank you. Now, you've raised a whole host of issues which we're going to need to come back to. But one of the points you yourself have raised for discussion is the problems revealed by the Auditor General and the failure to resolve those problems. I don't know whether you had an opportunity to follow the evidence of Mr. Gordy on Monday of last week, but Mr. Gordy referred to some information in the draft affidavit from Mr. Makwetu, the late Kimi Makwetu, who was then the Auditor General. And Mr. Makwetu, and Chair, just for your reference, the witness won't have this page. For your reference, this is at bundle 4, page 871, in paragraph 61. Mr. Makwetu highlights, amongst other things, the problem of irregular expenditure and getting out of control. And I'm just going to read to you evidence that's already on the record. He says that the irregular expenditure in the year 2013 to 2014 was 0.01 billion. In 2014-2015, it was 0.55 billion, half a
Just
billion.
one second, Mr. Freund, 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Freund. What paragraph did you refer to in Mr. Makwetu's affidavit?
Paragraph 61, which is at page 871 in volume 4.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll repeat this, Chair, so that you may follow and the witness may follow. That in 2013-2014, the irregular expenditure revealed by the Auditor General's report was 0.01 billion. In 2014-2015 is 0.55 billion. In 2015-2016 is 15.3 billion. In 2016-2017 it's 20.3 billion. And in 2017 to 2018 is 24.2 billion. Now, my first question to you, Ms. Magadzi, is you have no reason to dispute that those are the figures that were revealed by the Auditor General's report. You accept that?
Yes, that's correct.
Would you also accept that it paints a really, truly disastrous collapse in financial management?
That's correct.
Now, what the Auditor General, the late Auditor General, also said in his draft affidavit, if I can refer the Chair to, let's check this, 871. Bear with me, please. Mr. Makwetu said that every year the Portfolio Committee called the Auditor General's team for a briefing on the Auditor General's reports, and he says, I cannot fault the Portfolio Committee for the Transport Portfolio on its diligence by calling the executive authority and entity to account, in the sense of calling the Auditor General and calling, amongst others, the Minister. I take it you would accept that praise from the Auditor General.
Thank you very much. I appreciate.
But he says the following, and I'm now reading to you from page 959, paragraph 249 of his same draft affidavit. He says this: although the Portfolio Committee's interrogation of the audited results was visible from the records of the PCs, the Portfolio Committees, he says no real recommendations or corrective action had been noted during the period under review. Furthermore, there was evidence that the Portfolio Committee would request an action or initiative to be taken, but the follow-up thereon was lacking. And I must say that it's not only he who has been critical of follow-up on corrective action, Mr. Gordy, for one, and others have made the same point. Now, if I heard you correctly a little earlier, you yourself accept, I think, that this is a real problem, that it's one thing for the Portfolio Committee to draw attention to a problem, to refer to it in its report, to have its report adopted by the National Assembly. But it's another thing to get those concerns addressed, and addressed timeously and appropriately. I think I see you nodding. You agree that this is a real problem.
It is indeed a serious challenge and a real problem, because many a times in the Portfolio Committee we were raising lack of consequence management at PRASA, and we were also raising the question of repeat findings by the Auditor General, which actually were never being addressed by PRASA as such, and hence you see the irregular expenditure was growing and growing and growing.
Now, as I read the Constitution, the executive is accountable to Parliament. And if Parliament refers to problems and requires certain issues to be addressed, and they're not addressed, is it not possible in your view for Parliament to have done more? Must Parliament just sit back and once it's adopted a report, is that the end of the matter? No more responsibility for Parliament?
No, not really. That is not the end of the matter. Let me indicate, like you have so eloquently said, sometimes there were the follow-up, particularly from the Portfolio Committee, was not as efficient as you would want to see. And let me also say that this to me was a challenge, because you don't necessarily have systems which will be able to assist you to say there are these issues which you have raised as a Portfolio Committee, and therefore you need to make a follow-up. In Parliament, we don't necessarily have those type of systems which actually can be able to assist you as a Portfolio Committee to can make thorough doing of your work with respect to critical issues that you have raised, you have spoken to, that you must follow up, particularly with the executing authority, so that they don't fall by the wayside. And in this instance, I so agree that indeed matters of following up on certain issues, particularly holding the executive to account on certain matters, was one of the things which I would say as a Portfolio Committee we were found wanting.
Well, Mr. Freund, debate and discuss that very issue a little further, a little more detail. Sorry, Chair, were you trying to come?
I'm sorry, Mr. Freund. Ms. Magadzi, I think you need to be commended for making the statement that you accept that your Portfolio Committee, and it may not be the only Portfolio Committee, but you are talking about your own, the Portfolio Committee that you chaired, that it was found wanting when it came to following up on what needed to be done by the executive to address the problems. Am I correct that that's what you have said?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Yes. Earlier on, Mr. Freund read from Mr. Makwetu's affidavit, where Mr. Makwetu, although I think in another part of his affidavit had some praise for your committee, but said in another part of his affidavit that when one looks at the minutes or the documentation relating to meetings of the portfolio committee, your portfolio committee, recommendations or corrective action that the committee thought needed to be done to address the problems seemed to be not reflected in the minutes. That's how I understood what Mr. Freund was reading from Mr. Makwethu's affidavit. I would like to know what your reaction is to that part of Mr. Makwethu's affidavit. Do you also accept that maybe you did raise issues but fell short in terms of saying what needed to be done by the relevant functionaries to address the problems?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Indeed, like I indicated, there was lapse from the committee to deal with some of the issues which actually were raised. And even when we would deal with these matters in committee, we will just like deal with the matters in a superficial way and no thorough going to make sure that if at all there has been this type of an issue which was raised, whether by the Auditor General or by the Portfolio Committee itself, how do we make sure that the board does its fiduciary duty, but also the executing authority make sure that things are done according to the expectation from Parliament and also from the Auditor General.
What was the reason for the committee not being able or not doing this part of its work? Well, what would you say? Was there unwillingness, or was there a lack of understanding of what it was supposed to do? Or what was the problem? Why was it not doing this?
Chairperson, let me indicate that doing oversight on 12 entities plus the department, the committee to a particular extent was overwhelmed by the work that we were doing, and that is why you will find that there were certain things that the committee will not do a thorough follow-up. But I need to indicate that the committee was doing to the best of our ability everything that we can be able to do, despite the fact that there were some deficiencies, Chairperson.
Would the deficiencies that you acknowledge in relation to the committee's performance of its oversight functions in relation to PRASA, also would they be found in relation to its performance of its functions in relation to the other 11 entities that it had to exercise oversight on? Or is the position that in regard to the other entities, when one goes to the minutes, one will find that the committee, maybe not all of those entities, but in a number of them, it would not just end up with raising issues, it would actually make recommendations or point the way to either the relevant boards or the minister of what should be done, and would follow up on what was done? Or was this a deficiency that was to be found in regard to all the entities that the committee was looking after?
Chairperson, let me indicate that earlier on in my affidavit, I indicated that most of the entities had stability. You will have the board working and finishing their term, the CEOs the same, and therefore it was very easy because you would have somebody who will be able to follow up on the issues that we have raised, and then they are able to come back to you. You will have somebody who will be able, when you request a report, be able to submit the report to you as requested. But in the instance of PRASA, as has been indicated, the turnover of executives in the main, particularly on operational matters, you will find that you can ask one thing several times and still being unable to get the thing that you have requested from PRASA, whether you request that in a meeting or you request that in writing. It was becoming a difficulty because today there is this group CE. The next time when you come, there is another, you still repeat the same thing again, and that is what was a challenge. And let me also indicate that in this instance, you will have the board that will come in and say, we will go and do. And in the end, you don't get the expected outcome. But I don't need to say that we were, as a portfolio committee, somewhere we also couldn't make it through. So for me, I would say that it definitely was quite a challenge for the portfolio committee.
Did you raise the problems that you raised with the board also with the relevant ministers at different times?
Yes, we did.
And did they promise to act but did not act? Did they promise not to act? What was the position?
Remember, let me just indicate that you have the board, which actually, I'll take the words from Dr. Molefe, who would always be saying, it is my fiduciary duty, and failed the portfolio committee in executing this fiduciary duty.
And what about the minister? What would the ministers say? Because let me tell you, when I saw these figures that have been of irregular expenditure in Mr. Makwetu's affidavit that Mr. Freund read to you, they shocked me. But what particularly shocked me was that every year they were going up and up and up, as if there was nobody keeping an eye on saying, actually, the irregular expenditure should go down, not up. And for me, the most obvious question is, where were the people who were supposed to check that this irregular expenditure did not go up every year? And it gave me the impression it's like the management at PRASA had decided we are going to show whoever that we don't care about what they say about irregular expenditure. It's just going to go up. I mean, 2013, 2014 financial year, it was 0.01 billion rand, which I think would be about 100 million rand. Then I may be wrong. Then the next year, 2014, 2015, that was the first financial year that your committee, you were leading the committee. It's 0.55 billion rand. That would be about 550 million rand. It's quite a big jump. And then, as if that was not enough, the following year, this is when your committee has been around for at least 2 years or something. 2015, 2016, it jumps from 550 million rand to 15.3 billion rand. How is that possible? And you would have thought that somebody would hit the roof and say this can no longer be allowed to continue, and that the following year it would actually go down drastically. But no, it goes up. The following financial year, 20.3 billion rand. The next financial year, 2017, 2018, 24.2 billion rand. So it is like all the people who are supposed to exercise oversight, it's like they don't care about this trend. And yet it's a trend that should shock them, that should make them want to do something they've never done before on the basis that this cannot happen under our watch. During these years, was your committee aware of this irregular expenditure every year and the fact that it was going up?
Yes, Chairperson, we were very much aware of the irregular expenditure which was uncontrollable. We would engage with the Chairperson and the Minister, and that is why most of the times with our budget review report, part of the recommendations will always be there, that this is what we would like to see as a committee. But unfortunately, that was never being followed up either by the executing authority or by the Board of Governance in PRASA. And what really happened was that the irregular expenditure was just ballooning every year. You can only do your bid, Chairperson, by making sure that what we are expected to do, you do. But let me indicate that very challenging was the fact that much as you raise this with the executing authority and the Board of Governance, there was no change at all. And this is one of the things which actually was making us to really focus on to what exactly is happening in PRASA, because the other thing that was for us a concern was that the capital programs were not being done thoroughly as our anticipation, as was in the strategic plan. You would expect to go and see the station revitalization and nothing is happening. You want to see the trains that have been banned being refurbished. You don't really see that, but instead you see the irregular expenditure going up and up just like that. And for us, this was what was very frustrating to the Portfolio Committee, because that is why I said PRASA was our major focus in the portfolio committee. And despite the fact that we were focusing on what was happening in PRASA, we were not getting the expected outcomes.
Well, I don't know what the protocols are between the portfolio committee and the National Assembly, but my own thinking is that at some stage, your committee or you as chairperson with this ballooning irregular expenditure would talk to the leadership of Parliament and say, there is something really shocking here, something needs to be done, and maybe the National Assembly should raise it with the President and say, you are the head of the executive. There is this shocking thing that is happening. The portfolio committee has spoken to the board, has spoken to the minister, but it just keeps on ballooning. Take steps to address this. Is this something that was done? Is this something that your committee couldn't do because it has to follow certain channels or what? But I just think that this was something that if the board and the minister were not giving proper attention to, should have been raised even with the President, because he appoints the minister and the minister appoints the board, or I don't know, appoints the board if they don't do their job, and the minister appoints the CEO, I guess. If people don't do their job and they've been given a chance to say, sort this out, they should be fired. If they can't do their job, they've been given a chance to do it properly, and they can't, particularly if we're talking about taxpayers' money. Was this something that could be done, was done, could have been done, but did not succeed? Do you know?
Chairperson, we raised this matter with the House Chair. We even submitted a report, and subsequent to that, the House Chair, I think after we submitted our report, came back to us to say we need to do our investigation into what is happening. But indeed, the matter which was challenging was raised. And let me also indicate that with the budget review report, the Speaker of the National Assembly will, once the report has been accepted by Parliament, refer the report to the Minister for actions to be taken with the recommendations that will be included in the report.
But you don't know whether it went to the point of being raised with the President, that you don't know?
That I don't know, Chairperson. The only thing that I know would be that the Minister responsible will get the review report with the recommendations, and as a portfolio committee would expect the Minister to act on the review report.
Yes. I'm going to raise something that maybe Mr. Freund was going to raise later, but it's convenient for me to raise it now. During most of those years that Mr. Makwetu refers to, when irregular expenditure was ballooning, I happen to know from evidence given in this commission by other witnesses under the PRASA work stream that PRASA did not have a permanent group CEO because Mr. Montana left in 2015, around June. And So some of the years, I don't know if I heard recently that finally the Group CEO for PRASA has been appointed or not, but I do know that at least for most of last year, there was an administrator, I think, but the last Group CEO was permanently appointed as at some time last year was Mr. Montana, who left in 2015. What did your committee do about the failure on the part of the minister or the executive to appoint a permanent Group CEO at PRASA as soon as possible after Mr. Montana had left?
Chairperson, thank you very much. Every time the board came to the portfolio committee, we were more interested in wanting to know, because it was not only the group CEO that was acting. You had even in other areas, your CFO, there was challenges, and the portfolio committee would also want to know from the board as to when is the appointment of the CEO. And let me tell you that the departure of Mr. Montana left the PRASA with acting, whether even in their subsidiaries or in the other entities of PRASA. I think there were very few areas where you will be having permanent CEO. PRASA properties, that is where you will have your permanent CEO. But the other entities, the autopex, you will have your person, PRASA Rail, you will have somebody who's permanent. But the other areas within PRASA, there will be somebody who is acting, and hence the challenge that we are seeing. We indeed were raising these matters with the board, with the minister, but unfortunately, the turnover, like I had indicated, in 5 years you've got 3 ministers, in 5 years you've got like 4 boards, in 5 years you've got a plethora of acting group CE. It definitely becomes a challenge for you to can be able to put your fingers on the pulse.
What excuses do you remember as having been told to the committee why these positions, particularly the one for Group CEO, maybe, and CFO if there were vacancies there, why they were not being filled? Do you remember what excuses you were told as the committee?
Chairperson, there was not necessarily very, I wouldn't say that we were told that these are the reasons why there cannot be any CEO being appointed. But from our, let me say, from the assessment of the portfolio committee, while you are advertising the post as the board, then you leave, and therefore the next board that comes will also find that I remember the board that was chaired by Judge Maluleke, when they wanted to make an appointment, only to find that the post was like 18 months having been advertised, and therefore meaning that they had to re-advertise the post again. So there was not necessarily a good reason told to the portfolio committee as to why was it so difficult to be able to appoint the group CEO.
Okay. So as you sit there, you are able to say, really, you as the committee were never given any convincing or good reason why these appointments were not being made by whoever was supposed to make them.
Seated here, Chairperson, I definitely can be able to indicate that for me or the Portfolio Committee, there was no a good reason why an appointment cannot be made, because the departure of Mr. Montana, you expect that within 6 months or so, a Group CE should have been appointed, but it was never to be. It was just, there will be this person coming in to act, and then the next person coming in to act, and that is how it was, because even us in the Portfolio Committee, you would only invite PRASA to come and deal with this matter or that matter. Then the next thing, you are having this person as acting Group CE. And from the board, there is no word as to what has really happened to the previous person who was acting in this position. So that is how I would characterize what we were seeing in PRASA.
Thank you, Ms. Magadzi. Mr. Freund?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Magadzi, you've dealt with very many issues since last I asked you any questions. So I'd like to go back over a couple of the issues that you've just been dealing with. The first is that if I heard you correctly, but you must correct me if I'm wrong, when you first started explaining the ineffectiveness of the recommendations or requirements in the reports of the committee to actually bring about change, I think I heard you saying that there was no system in place to monitor whether what was required had been done and had been done in time. We've used the term in this commission, no tracking and monitoring system. Am I correct that that was a problem you experienced?
That's correct.
And I'm assuming, given that you were a senior person in Parliament, that you would have interacted with your colleagues, other chairpersons of other committees. I'm assuming that it was not your committee alone that had the problem of no tracking and monitoring system. I'm assuming that this must have been a widespread problem across the committees. Would that be a fair assumption?
I wouldn't talk to the other portfolio committees, but let me stick to the portfolio committee that I was chairing. That for me, that was one of the challenges that we were experiencing. And I wouldn't, let me say that listening to Mr. Frolick on Friday, that was one of the issues that he highlighted, that the systems have been put in place, but it still has to yield better fruits.
Well, did you engage with Mr. Frolick or anybody else to try to push to achieve effective tracking and monitoring systems?
No, not really.
Now, you also said another problem you've experienced was that requests would be made at portfolio committee meetings of senior representatives of PRASA, and the expectation was that at the next meeting, and often an arrangement would be made for when this is going to take place, the people who you expected to report back and the issues on which you expected them to report back simply didn't happen. Am I correct?
That's correct. To a particular extent, that is what we were experiencing.
Now, you can fairly point fingers at those who failed to honour their undertakings. But can we not also point fingers at your committee for itself not following up on those issues? And in particular, is it not correct that you had all the legal powers you needed to compel witnesses to appear, to compel witnesses to produce documents, and that you simply failed to do that?
I agree.
Now, we've focused thus far quite a bit on the problem of irregular expenditure as revealed in the reports and as confirmed by the Auditor General's reports. But there was another important part of the context during which your oversight took place, and that is the Public Protector's report on PRASA titled Derailed and issued in September of 2015. I'm sure you would have become familiar with that report in your capacity as chair of the committee, am I right?
That's correct.
Now, the Derailed report is a long report with many features, but I want to put to you for your comment that the complaints that were upheld included improper awarding of tenders, maladministration, corruption, conflict of interests, financial mismanagement, nepotism, and improper treatment of whistleblowers. Do you agree that those were all complaints upheld by the by the Public Protector?
That is correct.
So, and those complaints, those findings arose from complaints submitted by a trade union in 2012, which were finally upheld in 2015, but only in part because the Public Protector said, I haven't had time to get to grips with a number of the other complaints, so I'm going to continue to investigate some of that, and I also want other steps to be taken. And I want the board to take responsibility for investigating and procuring a forensic investigation of certain issues. And I want National Treasury to get involved and investigate certain things. Is that a fair summary I'm giving?
That's correct.
So you not only have mushrooming irregular expenditure, you have very good reason to suspect that related to this irregular expenditure is corruption, is criminal activity. And that, I would imagine, should be a matter of very great concern to your committee. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Now, I want to take you to something that Mr. De Freitas dealt with. I believe this document was sent to you, Ms. Magadzi, but for the chair's reference, I'm referring to volume 4, page 485, and this is a letter that Mr. De Freitas says that he sent to you. It's a letter dated the 8th of July 2016.
I'm sorry, Mr. Freund, just repeat the volume and the page.
Just checking that I'm giving you the right reference, Chair. It's volume... Sorry, I have a wrong reference here. If you can just bear... Sorry, it's volume 4, and I keep looking at volume 3. Volume 4... I think page 485. Sorry, I'm struggling here. Just give me a moment.
Oh, yeah, no, you are right. Bundle 4, okay? And what's the page again?
Chair, I'm just checking. The page I said was 485, but I think I've given you the wrong reference.
Well, actually, maybe you can look at it. I see it's time for the tea break. You can have a look at it, and then after the tea break, we can continue. We'll take the tea break.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
It's 11:15. We'll resume at 11:30. We adjourn.
So we will resume. You can go off camera if you wish, Ms. Magadzi, and we'll come back just
Okay, let's proceed, Mr. Freund.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was referring you in error to the wrong bundle. It's bundle 3, page 485, not bundle 4, page 485.
Okay,
Bundle
thanks.
3, page 485.
Are you going to later refer to bundle 4 or you are not sure? I want to see whether to get...
Yes,
You might.
yes, I will in all probability also refer to bundle 4.
Okay, all right. I've got it, Mr. Freund. Mr. Freund,
Yes, Chair?
I've got it.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Magadzi, this particular document, which you have told me you are familiar with, is a letter to yourself dated the 8th of July 2016 from Mr. Manny de Freitas, a DA MP on your Portfolio Committee. It's headed Request to Launch Inquiry into 51 billion rand PRASA tender process. And I'll read you from the letter. It says, I write to you in the light of the recent news that the 51 billion rand tender for the purchase of 20 new locomotives by the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa may have been unduly interfered with by the Gupta family and Duduzane Zuma. This is the latest reported case in which allegations have been made that the Gupta family have attempted to rig the tender process so that they may benefit. And then Mr. de Freitas refers you to section 55(2) of the Constitution, and he says Parliament must use its power to launch an inquiry into this matter immediately. And he proposes that the Gupta brothers and Duduzane Zuma should appear before Parliament to account. And he looks forward to a response soonest. Can you confirm that you did receive this letter from Mr. de Freitas?
Yes, I can confirm that I received the letter from Mr. de Freitas.
Now, what Mr. de Freitas says is that you did not respond to it, that he again inquired about his letter, and that you acknowledged receipt of the letter and said that you would address it, but he said that you never did. What is your response to that?
Let me indicate that all correspondences which were coming to the committee were addressed by the Portfolio Committee, and even the letter that is spoken to was dealt with in the Portfolio Committee, and I wouldn't take a decision on my own that I am calling the Gupta brothers or calling any other person to the Portfolio Committee. It will be the decision of the committee as to how to deal with the matter or the correspondence that has been sent to the chairperson. That is how we're able to deal with the letter from Mr. de Freitas. Thanks.
Now, is it your evidence that this letter was in fact placed before the committee and was in fact discussed by the committee?
It was discussed by the committee.
And what was the decision of the committee?
The committee felt that it was not, how can I put it? It was not an opportune time, or they felt that there is no need for us to can be able to engage the Gupta brothers at that particular moment. That's how I can put it. And we never engaged with the Gupta brothers.
Well, let me just read you the summary that Mr. de Freitas gives of the newspaper article that prompted his request. I'm reading, Chair, from page 381 of Volume 3. He says, on the 19th of June 2016, the Sunday Times published a story with details of a 51 billion rand tender for the purchase of 20 new locomotives by PRASA, which involved the Gupta family and Duduzane Zuma. Allegations included that the Gupta family had attempted to rig the tender process so that they would benefit. Other allegations included statements made in the media by previous PRASA GCEO Lucky Montana, who claimed that he was introduced to the Gupta family and associated by, that probably should read and associates, by previous Transport Minister Ben Martins, and that the Gupta family wanted their associates to sit on the PRASA board. Now, would those allegations, if true, not be a very considerable concern to your committee?
Let me indicate that once you put issues to the committee and the committee discuss, and the outcome is such that the committee does not believe that they can be able to take the matter forward, it is definitely the decision of the committee, not my decision. Much as it was there in the newspapers, we never took it up because the committee felt that it was not necessary at that particular moment for us to can be able to take the matter forward and call, as requested by Mr. De Freitas, the people as mentioned.
But what I'm asking you is something slightly different. I'm asking you whether, if those allegations were true, they would be matters that should be a very considerable concern to your committee.
Indeed, we made, from the Portfolio Committee, there were several issues which we raised within the committee meetings, and as we were doing oversight, and we felt that at that particular moment, we will not want to engage into what has been indicated by Mr. De Freitas.
Ms. Magadzi, I'm going to ask the same question for the third time, and if you again don't answer it, I'll move on. The question is this: if those allegations were true, are they not allegations which ought to have been of concern to the committee?
Mr. Fron, the allegations were a concern to the committee, hence we had discussions in the Portfolio Committee, and even when we were doing oversight, we wanted to establish what exactly were the issues.
Well, did you ever ask any of the Gupta family, or Mr. Zuma, Mr. Duduzane Zuma, or Mr. Lucky Montana to come and either admit or deny what had been reported in detail in the Sunday Times on the 19th of June 2016?
No, we didn't.
Now, I want to move on.
Well, hang on before you move on, Mr. Freund. Why didn't you?
Chairperson,
was
let me...
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry about that. Here was an article in a newspaper that was making very serious allegations, including allegations about the Gupta family, and saying Mr. Montana had said the Gupta family had wanted their associates to sit on the PRASA board. Now, let's just recall what the public knew in 2016 about the Gupta family. The public knew that 3 years earlier, in 2013, there had been a huge outcry in the country because of the landing at Waterkloof Air Base of a Gupta aeroplane. And that had raised a lot of questions about the Guptas having a lot of influence, allegedly, on the then President Zuma and the government. Also in 2016, the public knew, and I take it that your committee and yourself knew, that Mr. Jonas had in 2015 gone public and said that he had been taken to a meeting with the Guptas at the Gupta residence on the or he had gone public in 2016, in March actually, and this was June. He had gone public in March 2016, where he said a Gupta brother in that meeting had tried to bribe him in order for him to accept an appointment as Minister of Finance on the basis that if he accepted the money and if he accepted the appointment, which obviously would only be done by the then president, then he would work with them. So this is part of what the public knew by June 2016 when this article came up. A member of parliament says to your committee, let's act on these allegations. Let's call these people to come and admit or deny or tell us what they know about these allegations. Your committee doesn't ask them or summon them. My question is, why not?
Chairperson, I don't necessarily have an answer as to why we didn't call the Gupta brothers, but let me indicate that our discussion in the Portfolio Committee led us to a situation where we did not call the Gupta brothers, and I don't want to lie and say this is what we did, but my recollection was that with having discussed, the matter for me was closed in that, and that is how I can be able to say this is how far we went.
Based on what you are saying, it seems to me, and I want you to comment on this, it seems to me that you would not be able to challenge a proposition that the committee had no good reasons not to take this matter up and try and establish whether these allegations were true. What do you say?
Chairperson, I think you're correct. Probably the committee, at hindsight, I would say that the committee should have done something out of what was there in the newspapers, but we decided to say that this for us we cannot be able to do, and that's why I'm saying at hindsight for sure we could have done better.
Well, I just want to say, I like the idea that I think you are telling me matters as you remember them, and I think you are taking responsibility on behalf of the committee where it fell short. The reason I like that is because unless we are prepared to examine ourselves properly and see whether we have done our job the way it should have been done, and admit where we have not done the right thing, we are not going to be able to find solutions. So I like the fact that where you believe the committee fell short, you are able to say, I think we fell short here. But of course, this commission wants to go beyond that. It wants to try and establish what is it that would make a committee that is made aware of such serious allegations not to follow them up to establish if they're true. Now, you may not be able to say more than what you have told me, but one of the issues that other witnesses raised last week in regard to parliamentary oversight is that the ruling party has a study group, or what is referred to as a study group in Parliament, where members of the ruling party who serve in different portfolio committees, together with other, I think, members of Parliament, or maybe, I don't know whether members of the ANC or the leadership who might not be part of Parliament also come in, discuss matters that will be coming up at different portfolio committees, and that the message would, I don't know whether it's sometimes or all the time or often, be to members of the different portfolio committees that they must not be hard on the executive, because the ministers are ANC ministers, and sometimes those ministers are in those meetings of those study groups. So a minister will be going to a committee, but he knows that the party or the study group has instructed the ANC members of that committee not to be hard on them, which seems to me to be, don't do your oversight job properly. Because if you think you should be hard on a minister, you should be able to be hard on the minister, if you think that is justification. So in my mind, as we look at this matter, why your committee decided not to take up these issues, I'm wondering whether it might be because of such instructions from the study group, or maybe not from the study group, but maybe a general understanding that as ANC members, you shouldn't go too far or you shouldn't be hard on ministers and so on. Do you want to say anything about that?
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me indicate that our study groups meetings that we are holding, whether the minister is there, we will always have study group meetings in preparation for what we wanted to see happen in the committee. Because one thing for certain that you must remember is we have to replenish and make sure that we abide by the principles, the policies, the manifesto of the African National Congress. And hence, when we go into the study group to discuss matters, we discuss based on what we would like to see the outcomes being of the portfolio committee. Because what becomes interesting to us, Chairperson, is that we must make sure that we do and we execute the tasks within the mandate and the confines of the ruling party. And therefore, we will go into the study group, debate on issues, agree on the issues. But in this instance, let me indicate that we never in the study group discussed the approach towards the Mr. De Freitas letter, because normally I wouldn't even take the correspondences that comes to the chairperson to the study group, but we will look at the program of the portfolio committee and then be able to say, how do we handle this issue? The members of the study group will only get to know about the correspondences once they are in the portfolio committee. And therefore, we never discussed that issue in the portfolio committee. And probably those who would say that the study group will get instructions, we already have the instructions within the manifesto of the African National Congress. Those are the instructions that we should be able to abide by. We have the policies and the policies of the ANC, and those are the ones that we should be able to say, are we doing the right things when we do this and we're doing that? And I want to say, probably Mr. De Freitas, also in their party, they've got matters that they believe their party should be able to push, and I don't dispute how they would want to push their matters, but it cannot be correct if at all it is him who says that we get instructions, the portfolio committee must not do this. Every time the minister comes to the portfolio committee, we were making sure that without fear, without favor, issues that must be dealt with will be dealt with accordingly, irrespective of the fact that they are ministers of the African National Congress. Whatever issue needs to be dealt with, it will be dealt with in accordance to what it's at our disposal as the portfolio committee.
So are you saying that you have never had an instruction or suggestion from any ANC leader, whether inside Parliament or outside Parliament, to the effect that members of the ANC in Parliament must not be hard on either the ministers, ANC ministers, or the president of the ANC when they ask questions or perform their oversight functions?
Chairperson, I don't remember getting those kind of instructions from my party. And that is why, as a portfolio committee, we were always making sure that we do our work to the best of our ability. And that is why I am saying, going into Parliament, being in the portfolio committee, we always must make sure that we uphold the manifesto of the ruling party to make sure that what the ruling party has said it's going to be doing in this particular term of office gets done.
Mr. Freund?
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Magadzi, then I have to go back to the question that you've already been asked. There is a detailed set of allegations published in the press and drawn to the attention of your committee of what, if it is true, would probably amount to serious criminal misconduct in relation to a 51 billion rand tender at PRASA. If, as you say, your committee was under no pressure or instruction not to inquire into allegations against the Guptas, against Dudazani Zuma, and allegations of state capture, I want to put to you that it's inexplicable that your committee should decide not to investigate this. Do you want to comment, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Fred. Let me indicate that part of the things that the committee did was to make a recommendation that because there are serious issues in PRASA, there is a need for the state apparatus, your police, the Hawks, National Treasury, and other state apparatus to investigate the issues that were being raised in PRASA. And therefore, for us, once we had done that, we felt it was an opportune a moment that we will see an investigation being done by the Auditor General, by National Treasury, by the Hawks, by the South African Police Services, so that those who have done criminal activities within PRASA, or if there is corruption within PRASA, they must be held accountable, they must be arrested.
Did your committee specifically request the police, the Hawks, or any other agency to investigate this very allegation that we're now talking about, that was drawn to your attention by Mr. De Freitas's letter?
If you would recall, Dr. Molefe came and said, and even wrote a letter to the Speaker, wherein he was indicating that he has requested the state apparatus, I think it's the Hawks, if I'm not mistaken, for them to do certain investigations. And he was indicating that he doesn't see anything coming to fruition. And it was out of the recommendations that we made as a portfolio committee. And hence, when he wrote a letter to the Speaker, I also had an opportunity from the Speaker indicating that letter to the portfolio committee that this is what happened. But it was the recommendations that we made to say we believe that the state apparatus should be able to make an investigation, which the chairperson of the board of PRASA took up and subsequently was not happy about how issues were unfolding.
And as I understand it, that exchange related to what action should be taken following on the Public Protector's report, which was issued in or about November 2015. And even in relation to that, you were aware that Mr. Molefe was claiming that the Hawks were not doing what they should be doing to investigate those allegations. Do you agree with what I've just put?
That's correct.
So we go back to my earlier question. Did your committee specifically take steps to ensure that any agency would pertinently investigate the allegations to which I've just been referring which only came to light well after the publication of the Public Protector's Report, and which alleged very briefly a form of state capture attempt by the Guptas in respect of the board of PRASA. Now, you either did or you did not. Which is it?
So let me indicate that in Parliament you submit the regular reports, and we expect that those reports, once submitted, should be executed. But from the committee side, let me indicate that we did not.
Right, thank you. Now, there's something else I'd like to refer you to. It arose during the evidence of Ms. Matsoni, the DA deputy, the DA shadow minister for public enterprises.
Mr. Freund,
last week.
Mr. Freund, are you moving away from these particular allegations, or is it connected with them?
It's connected, Chair, but it is in a slightly different context, but it is connected.
Okay, let me...
Perhaps you should allow me a little latitude.
Yes, let me ask this question. Do you concede, Ms. Magadzi, that the conduct of your committee in not taking up these allegations to at least establish what the people concerned had to say about them, was a serious dereliction of duty on the part of your committee?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I wouldn't say it was dereliction of duty, but I would say that when you have a discussion in the Portfolio Committee, and the Portfolio Committee so agree that this is the route that we will take, for me, I take it that we did not disengage in our duties, but, or rather, as a Portfolio Committee, at that particular time, we saw it fit to take the route that we're taking.
Well, I thought your evidence was that the committee decided not to do anything about it at that time. Did I understand your evidence correctly?
Chairperson, let me indicate that I can't recollect properly so as to what we said in the Portfolio Committee, but there was no action that we took to that effect, and I wouldn't want to say that it was dereliction of duty, but I can rather be comfortable with the fact that we did not take any action.
Did you not have a duty? You were the chairperson of the committee, you were the leader of the committee, and I take it that you are supposed to show leadership and give guidance. Obviously, you couldn't force members of the committee to your view one way or another. They were free to make such decisions as they made, but each member of the committee, if they were to come here, they would have to decide whether they are defending their decision to do nothing or whether they accept that they should have done something and not doing something was a dereliction of duty. So I ask the question, were you not under a duty as a committee to do something about these allegations, particularly against the background that I gave earlier on?
Chairperson. I would agree with you that we didn't do anything.
But my question is a different one. Do you not agree that you were under a duty once you were made aware of such serious allegations? A 51 billion rand tender that was said to have been irregularly obtained, or in which the Gupta family and Mr. Duduzane Zuma were said to have been involved, and the allegation that the Guptas had tried to, wanted to ensure that the PRASA board had their associates in circumstances where we are talking about 2016. Remember, that is the year in which Ms. Thuli Madonsela issued her report. A few months later, we are talking about June. A few months later, she issued her state of capture report, which led to this commission. Already, there have been lots of allegations about the Guptas in the media, and things have happened. And you are told, you are made aware of these serious allegations. How is it possible that it can be said that the committee had no duty to do something about these allegations, if that is what you are saying?
Chairperson, that's why at hindsight, when these issues are raised, one believes that for sure, despite the fact that it was discussed in the portfolio committee and a particular decision was reached, one could have thought through to say, these are the issues that we need to follow up. But we never did anything. I have to be honest, we never did anything.
Yes, but remember, I'm going to say again, my question is a different one. Do you accept or do you not accept that the committee had a duty to do something about these allegations? You have said that the committee decided not to do anything, or the committee did not do anything. So my question is, do you not accept that the committee had a duty to do something?
Indeed, I accept the fact that the committee should have done something.
Okay, I guess I'm never going to get an answer to this direct question that I've asked about 3 times, Ms. Magadzi. I'm rather disappointed about that. I thought I would get a clear answer on what it seems to me clearly required the committee to do something. This was a committee that was aware that there was a lot of instability at PRASA. You told me that yourself. This was a committee where you were aware there were a lot of allegations of corruption. The public protector's report was out, derailed. This was a committee that was aware that there was irregular expenditure that was ballooning at PRASA. And then it gets told, becomes aware that there was a tender of 51 billion rand tender, which involved the Gupta family and Mr. Duduzane Zuma. And the allegations were that the Gupta family had attempted to rig the tender process so that they would benefit. And it was alleged that Mr. Montana had said that the Gupta family had tried to, had wanted to put its associates on the PRASA board by 2016, PRASA was in serious financial challenges. There were all kinds of allegations of corruption. On your own evidence, there was instability. And your committee that you were leading refuses to do something about something so serious. And you are not able to say, having been chairperson of that committee, that you know that the committee had a duty to do something. And it may well be, Ms. Magadzi, that part of the problem is that a lot of people were not making the judgment call that needed to be made in terms of their duties. Mr. Freund, you may continue.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I know that on our video conference facility, sometimes one can't clearly hear every word. So I just want to check with Ms. Magadzi that I heard her correctly, because I understood her when you asked her the question previously about whether she accepted that the committee had a duty to have acted in those circumstances. I thought I heard her to say that she accepts that the committee should have done something, which seems to me to be agreeing that there was a duty. So I just want to check with the witness whether I heard her correctly.
Yes.
That is correct, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I did hear that as well. And it may be that Mr. Freund is correct, that when you say the committee should have done something, it may be that that's another way of saying it had a duty. But what I did notice is that when for some time I continued to ask you the question whether there was a duty, you didn't say, no, when I said it should have acted, I meant it did have a duty. But I think Mr. Freund is right. We should give you an opportunity to say whether when you said it should have acted, you meant it did, you accepted that it had a duty, or the position is different. We need to, so that we are fair to you and your committee.
Chairperson, I think that is correct. We should. And I said at hindsight, we should have done something, Chairperson.
If I say, by saying the committee should have done something, you are accepting that it had a duty to do something. Am I showing a correct understanding of your evidence?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. So that, therefore, the committee's conduct in not doing something would be a dereliction of duty. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay, all right. Now I must thank Mr. Freund to correct this, because I certainly thought that you were not accepting that the committee had a duty. Of course, I think both you and I should accept a responsibility for that misunderstanding, because you also didn't say, no, when I say it should have acted, I mean I accept that it had a duty. But I think now it's been clarified. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr.
Thank
Freund.
you for that. Thank you, Ms. Magadzi. Now, I want to explore the same issue in a slightly different context. Ms. Matsoni gave evidence about a motion that was put on the floor of the National Assembly on the 8th of September 2016. And that was yet another attempt of an opposition party to persuade those with the power to make a decision, which is to say the MPs representing the majority party, to cause an investigation to take place into serious allegations of alleged state capture and of alleged corruption. And she told the chair about a motion that was put on the floor, a draft resolution to establish an ad hoc committee to investigate the alleged capture of state resources and undue influence over the government. And she said that it had widespread support from the opposition parties, but all the representatives of the majority party voted against that. And I will refer the chair to a document you don't have, Ms. Magadzi. But when I look at bundle 2, page 361, which is an extract from Hansard, I see that amongst the very many ANC MPs who voted against that proposal, that motion, was yourself. Am I correct? You voted against that.
That's correct.
And I want to understand why you voted against that. When you voted against that, were you acting on an instruction from the whip that this was the position to be adopted by all ANC MPs?
Mr. Freund, let me indicate that when we are in Parliament, I'm not in Parliament as myself. I am representing the African National Congress, and therefore will always and every time make sure that I toe the party line. And that is just exactly what I did.
And what was the party line on requests for investigations into allegations of state capture involving the Guptas, the Zumas, and others?
The motion which was put before Parliament, which was proposing the ad hoc committee, the ANC said we are not going to support that motion.
And can you tell me why not?
I don't necessarily would be able to say, I can speak my own thinking, but I will not say this is the reason why the ANC said that. But when the party say this is the route that we are going to take, you can't deviate from the route that the party has indicated that you must follow.
All right, let's move on.
Well, before you move on, Mr. Freund, I'm sorry, Mr. Freund, before you move on, but Ms. Magadzi, you are not telling me, are you, that as a member of Parliament, if there is a motion that must be voted upon, and your party says vote this way and not that way, you don't even ask why? You're not telling me that, are you?
Chairperson, I'm not telling you that the party would give a reason as to why, but or rather, let me say, I didn't ask the reason why. I just believe that my party say we are not going to support the motion, and I did exactly just that.
Are you able to tell me whether before your party told you which way to vote, whether you had come to your own view as to whether this was a motion that you would otherwise want to support or not support, or you had not come to any view by the time the party told you, and once the party told you, it was irrelevant what your view was.
Chairperson, like I indicated, I did not go to Parliament out of my own accord. I went to Parliament representing the African National Congress. And once there has been an indication from my party, I therefore would be able to follow what has been indicated by my party. And I would say in this instance, the motion put forward by Ms. Mazzoli, the ANC said we're not going to support, and definitely I did that, I did not support.
But at this stage, you are not able to share with me what reasons your party gave so that I can assess whether it had valid reasons for saying this motion should not be supported, or whether it had no valid reasons. You are not able to share with me what reasons the party gave.
I can't recall, Chairperson, as to what were the reasons why the party said we should not support. I really cannot recall.
But sitting here now, knowing what you know, and what has happened over the years, do you have a view whether if you knew then what you know now, whether you would have, within the party, have spoken in favor of saying, let's support this? Obviously, you would, I think, on your approach, you would accept that if the party didn't agree with you, then you would go along with whatever the party decided. But internally, knowing what you know now, do you think that if you had known what you know now, you would have said, we must support this?
Chairperson, let me say, knowing that what I know now, I still believe that what the party had instructed us to do, for me, was correct.
So if the same thing were to happen, if we were to find ourselves in 2021 with a similar situation and a similar proposal, motion, and the party said, vote against this, you would still be comfortable with voting against the proposal?
Definitely, I will be following my party line.
Okay, all right. Mr. Freund?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Magadzi, I want to move on with some different issues, and I want to refer you in particular to a two-day meeting. I'm sure it must have been a very memorable meeting that took place on the 7th and 8th of March 2017, at which your committee gave consideration to the ongoing crisis within PRASA. Chair, this was dealt with in the evidence of Mr. De Freitas in volume 3, from page 387 through to page 391. And I think we can deal with this meeting fairly briefly, I hope, Ms. Magadzi. In the course of that meeting, it's correct, is it not, that your committee unanimously decided, albeit that people might have had different reasons for making the same decision, your committee unanimously decided that it was necessary for your committee to commence an inquiry into the affairs of PROSA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what divided the committee was what would be the important issues to be investigated in that inquiry. On the one hand, I want to put you your comment, at least the representatives of the DA were of the view that there were allegations of corruption and the like, particularly flowing out of what was understood to be the content of the Worksman's report, and they felt that that justified an inquiry. Do you agree with me so far?
That's correct.
And on the other hand, there were a number of members of the majority party who supported an inquiry, but whose motives were perhaps a little different. The issues that more concerned them were a little different. And I want to put to you that two of those key issues that led the majority party MPs to want to support such an inquiry was firstly this. There was anger on the part of ANC MPs about what was said to be allegations made by Mr. Popo Molefe that the African National Congress had been the beneficiary of monies through a contractor with PROSA that had really come from PROSA, and there was a feeling that this allegation was unjustified and unsubstantiated. That was one of the concerns, am I correct?
So, that is not correct. What the members of the African National Congress did was to, in a meeting which was scheduled, amongst other things which were we wanted to raise was for Mr. Molefe to come and tell us and give us evidence of the money that was paid to the African National Congress, because the monies which were indicated were in the court papers that the African National Congress has received money. I need to indicate that members of the Portfolio Committee, all of us, we were in agreement that we need to investigate the malfeasance which were happening, the corruption which was happening, criminal activities that we felt is happening in PROSA, and we all agreed to say we need, as we were talking, we were indicating that the issues that we were raising must form part of the terms of reference for the investigation. We also need to raise the issues that have been raised by the Auditor General, particularly on irregular, wasteful expenditure. We also need to factor in a number of things which actually were happening in PROSA, and there was no single party which was saying this is what we want to do. All of us as the member of the Portfolio Committee were agreeing on to the issues which were raised by members to be put in that. The question of the money that went to the ANC was a separate thing altogether from what we wanted to investigate.
All right. Now, I want to be clear because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding between us. The question that I've just asked you and that you've just answered relates to the events on the 7th and 8th of March 2017. That was an occasion on which you've agreed with me there was unanimity there should be an inquiry. But I just want to remind you, in case you have been at all confused, that there was a later event on the 20th of February 2018, so almost a year later, where there was also a decision by your committee to convene an inquiry. I'm sure you would know that. So I just want to check, when you tell the chair that all the issues you've mentioned, the allegations of corruption, malfeasance and so forth, were amongst the reasons why all members wanted this inquiry in March of 2017. You clearly had in mind March of 2017. You're not getting confused with February of 2018.
That is correct, Chairperson. Those were the issues, amongst other issues, which were raised by the members of the committee in March of 2017.
All right. Now, what I was putting to you was that there were few issues, as I saw them, that motivated ANC MPs on this committee at this time. I put to you the one which we've dealt with, which is about allegations of monies finding their way from PRASA ultimately into the ANC coffers. But the other issue that seemed to concern members of the ANC on this committee very considerably was the fact that the Portfolio Committee board had mandated a private sector firm of accused worksmen to conduct investigations, and there was a strong feeling on the committee that that was quite inappropriate. It should not have been done. Am I right that that was another part of the sentiment?
Mr. Frohnwell, you're correct. We had concerns on the appointment of the investigators in PRASA. And our concerns emanated from the fact that, one, the Werksman company was not part of the contracted legal firms which were there in PRASA. And be that as it may, we said it should have been appointed correctly. Whether they go out in a bidding or whatever was done, it was irregularly appointed. And those were the issues that we're raising and wanting to get the reasons why an irregular appointment, because we raised it several times in the meeting that there is a need to regularize the appointment of Werksman. We were not disputing the fact that they are doing the job, but we wanted them to be regularized.
All right. And that issue itself had quite a long history. I just want to mention, I don't know if you recall, that in March of 2016, quite some time before we're talking about in March of 2017, it had already been confirmed by the Minister in an answer to a question in Parliament that Worksman's attorneys had been appointed to lead this investigation, the forensic investigation. They'd done that at the request of the board chaired by Mr. Popo Molefe. This had long been common knowledge. Do you agree?
Chairperson, in several meetings that we held as a portfolio committee, we raised the issue that Werksman has been irregularly appointed.
And I don't want to get engaged in addressing whether you're right or wrong on that. You may be right, you may be wrong, but let's just assume that that was an issue that was in dispute or an issue on which the committee wanted some clarity. The fact of the matter is, and I think you've already confirmed this, that by the end of this two-day marathon meeting, there is complete unanimity on your committee for the reasons you've already told the chair, that there was need now for an inquiry into the affairs of PRASA. I think you agree with that, am I right?
That's correct.
And then something dramatic happened. At the end of the meeting, of the 8th of March, the Acting Director General of the Department of Transport, Mr. Mokonyama, I believe, read out a letter that had been sent to the committee from the then Minister, Dipua Peters, in which she said that she had dissolved the board headed by Mr. Molefe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But as you've told the chair, the reasons for the need for the investigation into PRASA were widespread. They related to a lot of financial irregularities and a lot of alleged misconduct, alleged corruption, and the like. You agree? I see you nod. I just want to check.
I do agree, Chairperson. Agree.
Now, what puzzles me, if it's factually correct, as I think it may be, is that a week later, on the 14th of March, the ANC members of this portfolio committee did a complete turnaround. And they said, there is no longer any need for any investigation into PRASA by this committee. Do you agree that that's factually correct?
Chairperson, that is not correct. What we had agreed upon in the portfolio committee, we still believe that we needed to continue with it. But I must hasten to indicate that before the committee, we had three legislations which actually demanded the attention of the committee. And hence the investigation was put kind of on hold because we're dealing with the National Transport, the amendment of the National Land Transport Act, the amendment of the adjudication of administrative road traffic offences, and lastly, the Road Accident Benefit Scheme Bill, which were in front of the Portfolio Committee, and hence there was no turnaround by the members of the African National Congress. Instead, our focus was to make sure that we deal with this legislation to finality.
Well, I want to put to you that your memory on this issue is simply not correct, and that there was a very clear and deliberate decision by your committee at that time not to proceed with the inquiry that you had decided the week before to commence. And I want to put to you that if one reads the report prepared by the Parliamentary Monitoring Group of that meeting and follow-up meetings, the discussion makes clear that many of the, or at least several, of the members of the ANC, in justifying not proceeding with the inquiry, used as their reason the fact that the board had been dismissed, and said, having been dismissed, there was now no longer any need for this inquiry. Do you dispute all of that?
Chairperson, the investigation was not about the board of PRASA, but the investigation was about the happenings in PRASA, and therefore it was not going to be possible that now that the board of PRASA has been dismissed, it means that the challenges and the activities which warranted to be investigated were gone with the going out of the board. So, that cannot be the issue.
Sorry, I'm not clear that I understand your evidence. I think I understand you to be saying this, that you agree that the mere fact that the board had been removed was not in itself an adequate reason not to continue with the investigation. Do you agree with that?
That's correct, Chairperson.
So are you saying that you stand by your evidence that the committee did not reverse its decision previously to conduct the inquiry? It proceeded with that decision.
The committee did not reverse the decision to make inquiries into PRASA.
Did it implement the decision?
The decision was not implemented, Chairperson. Like I indicated, we were under pressure to deal with the legislation which was before the committee.
So it didn't reverse the decision, but it didn't implement the decision. How does it come about that you don't implement a decision which you've just taken?
Chairperson, like I indicated, Mr. From, through you, Chairperson, we had legislations before the committee which we were supposed to deal with and see them through, and that is why we put on hold the investigation.
Just so that there's no misunderstanding between us, what Mr. De Freitas said in his evidence was the following, and I'm reading from Bundle 3 at page 390. He said, at the end of the second day of hearings, the committee unanimously agreed that it undertake investigation to pass on the problems that it was currently confronting. The terms of reference and other details would be discussed in subsequent meetings. The motion to initiate an inquiry into PRASA was reconfirmed by myself at the same meeting. The Parliamentary Communications Service released a statement echoing this. From what I hear, I don't think you dispute any of that.
No, that is why I'm saying that we agreed on the investigation.
But of course, in order to have an investigation, the next step was to agree on the terms of reference. You never met in the next 11 months to agree on the terms of reference, did you?
Chairperson, we didn't meet to deal with the terms of reference. My recollection is to the effect that we were even supposed to have some amongst us as members of the Portfolio Committee to go into that particular investigation, but that never happened.
You see, I hear what you say, but I must put to you what Mr. De Freitas says so that you can comment on it. He says that at this next meeting, which is 1 week after the decision that was taken to have this inquiry, he says that, well, let me go back at top of page 392, he refers... Can I proceed?
Yes, please.
At the top of page 392 of Bundle 3, he says this: Mr. Sabande said the committee had agreed on an inquiry initially. However, the committee had not anticipated that the minister would be so quick to respond about PRASA. An inquiry was not necessary as the PRASA board had already been expelled. Then it continues, Mr. Maswanganyi, who later became minister, suggested that the minister be requested to appear before the committee, after which the committee should decide whether to pursue the inquiry or not. And then he says, I stated that since the 8 March meeting, it appears that ANC members have been instructed to toe the line and keep quiet. I expressed concern that the PC allowed the minister to tell it how to conduct oversight. I could not support the proposal to abandon the inquiry. Now, what Mr. De Freitas is doing here is he's lifting out of the PMG minutes of this very meeting. And I want to put to you again that the sentiment expressed by the majority at this meeting was that because the board had been removed, the feeling of the ANC members was that there was no need to continue with the meeting. I think you disagree with that, am I right?
I disagree with that. If you would read again what Mr. Masongani said, that was part of how we wanted to proceed with the investigation, because we wanted the minister to come so that we can be able to say to the minister, this is what we are going to be doing with respect to the investigation into PRASA. And unfortunately, can't recall whether the minister did come to the meeting or not, but it was not to say for the fact that the committee has been dismissed, therefore we need to dismiss the investigation. The investigation was not about the committee, but the investigation was about the happenings in PRASA.
All right. And it appears, from what I've just read to you, that was attributed to Mr. Masmangani, that the suggestion was that after hearing the minister, the committee should decide whether to pursue the inquiry or not. And I want to put to you that quite clearly what must have happened is that a decision was taken not to pursue the inquiry.
There is nowhere in the minutes of the portfolio committee where we are saying we are discontinuing with the investigation. And let me also indicate that subsequent to that, there is a report that we wrote as the portfolio committee and submitted that report to the chair of chairs. Our intention was that we wanted that report to be tabled in Parliament so that it can be within the records of Parliament, but it never went to Parliament.
Well, I'm going to come back to where we are for the moment, just so that we can all get our bearings about time. You are aware, are you not, that on the 20th of February 2018, which is 11 months after the time we're talking about, again to conduct an inquiry. All right? A formal committee to conduct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Freund.
Multiple.
I'm sorry, Mr. Freund. I couldn't hear a number of parts of your question. It may be that the transcribers could hear you, but I think there were technical problems. Maybe just repeat the question and we'll see whether the problems are still there or not.
Yes, with pleasure, Chair. I'm just endeavouring to get confirmation from Ms. Magadzi that 11 months after these March 2017 meetings we've been talking about, there was another set of meetings that really commenced on the 20th of February 2018, in which another decision was taken to conduct an inquiry into the affairs of craftsmen. I just wanted to check with Ms. Magadzi that you call that and can confirm it.
I can't hear you clearly.
Let me check with the transcribers whether they can hear. 1 second, Mr. Freund. The transcribers, are they able to hear Mr. Freund? They can't hear him. Do they need some time to attend to the problems, or is you can try again? Okay, Mr. Freund, the transcribers or the people recording the proceedings could not hear you. Let's try again and see whether it will be better now.
Chair, let me try again. What I'm asking you, Ms. Magadzi, is whether you can just confirm that about 11 months later, from March of 2017, in February of 2018, there was another formal decision adopted by your committee to commence an inquiry into maladministration within PRASA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I know that we're jumping the gun a bit, but that too did not result, in fact, in an inquiry. That inquiry never, in fact, happened. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We'll come back to that later. I want to just finish off on where we were, which was more about March 2017. And I just want to understand more clearly from you what happened to this inquiry, because on the 8th of March 2017, you formally resolve to commence an inquiry. You formally resolve that you will meet to consider the terms of reference. But as you say, it was never implemented, and the terms of reference were never discussed or agreed. Now, is it your evidence that the sole explanation for that is that your committee got too busy with other work?
That's correct, Mr. Frank. We were very busy with the legislations that were before the Portfolio Committee, and every time at the slightest moment, then we would revert. Remember, it's not only PRASA that we were overseeing. We're trying to balance the whole equation, and that is why I said the most crucial thing that held us to be unable to continue with the investigation was the legislations which were before the Portfolio Committee.
All right, we'll come back to that later. I want to move on to another letter that Mr. De Freitas told the chair that he sent to you. It's a letter dated the 8th of June 2017, and it's dealt with in his report at page 394, and he says that on that occasion he wrote a letter to you requesting that the committee summon the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigations, or Hawks, to provide a comprehensive and detailed report to the progress of the investigation into PRASA. He says he requested a response be sent to him by the 14th of June 2017, and he says again no response was received. Do you recall that letter, and can you confirm that you gave him no response?
Let me indicate once more that any other correspondence that would come to the chairperson will be dealt with in the committee. And the outcomes, Mr. De Freitas was part of that particular committee. Unlike external people, he would be able to get the outcomes in the committee. And in this instance, I wouldn't say that I never responded to that correspondence, but it was dealt with within the Portfolio Committee.
And what was the decision of the Portfolio Committee to Mr. De Freitas' request that the Hawks be asked to provide a comprehensive and detailed report into the progress of the investigation into PRASA?
I can't recollect as to what was the decision of the Portfolio Committee in this matter.
You were aware, were you not, that at least Mr. Molefe was alleging that the Hawks were not adequately investigating the many issues that he had referred to the Hawks for investigation? You knew that that was his claim, am I correct?
That's correct.
And fair to say that your committee never put pressure on the Hawks to disclose to your committee what progress, if any, they were making in respect of what had been referred to them by Mr. Molefe and his board.
That's correct. The Hawks was never invited to the Portfolio Committee, and therefore we could not get information as to progress with respect to issues as raised in for PRASA.
All right. I want to move on to a different topic. Okay, if I can refer you.
Oh, I think Mr. Freund,
400.
Mr. Freund, I think it's the convenient time to take the lunch break.
As you please, Chair.
We'll adjourn for lunch and resume at 2. We adjourn.